Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of our 3-part webinar series all about using BTP for your S/4HANA journey. If you're joining us again, welcome back. It's great to see you. And if this is your first session, big welcome to you. You're in exactly the right place. Part 1 is available on demand on our website if you'd like to catch up. And don't worry, just like part 1, today's session will be recorded so you can revisit it later. So today we're diving into a topic that keeps SAP professionals very busy, integrating S/4HANA with SAP Integration Suite. And we've got 2 of our experts here to guide you through it. We've got Sab, our SAP BTP Integrations Manager, and Yash, our SAP BTP Integrations Lead. My name is Jack. I'm Digital Marketing Executive here at Bluestonex, and I'll be your facilitator for today, which is just a fancy way of saying I'll be moving the slides and hosting the Q&A. So for those joining us midway through the series, just a quick bit of context about us. We're a member of the SAP App House Network, and in fact, we're just one of only 2 in the UK. And globally, there's only 23 members. And it's a global network of co-innovation teams handpicked by SAP on our ability to design, build, and deliver solutions using human-centered design. In plain terms, that just means we don't just know the technology inside and out. We also focus on making sure the solutions we create actually work for the people who are using them. And alongside BTP, we have a long-standing reputation in master data management and governance. That's actually how we made our name. And we've combined that expertise with BTP capabilities to develop our flagship solution, Maestro, which helps organizations manage and govern their master data efficiently and effectively. But today our focus is on using Integration Suite to unlock the full potential of S/4HANA and how it interacts with other systems. So by the end of the session, we'll have had a brief look at how SAP Integration Suite simplifies integration, modernizes S/4HANA connectivity, and makes business processes visible. If you do have any questions throughout the session, please drop them in the chat as we go along, and we'll be sure to cover them during the Q&A at the end. With that in mind, I'll hand you over to the man who can tell you more about this, Sab. He'll be able to take you through everything in detail, so I'll throw it over to you, Sab.
Thanks, Jack. Good afternoon, everyone. If you could go to the next slide, please, Jack. Yeah, so before we go into seeing how Integration Suite can help your S/4HANA journey, let's just quickly rattle through on high-level overview of what Integration Suite in itself is, and how it can play a critical role with the modern architectures. So in today's reality, no customer just runs purely on SAP. Now, of course, they would have other products and services that complements their business. So having one integration backbone for everything simplifies the overall architecture. With that, Integration Suite can act as a unified integration platform for your business, which can connect to SAP, non-SAP, cloud, or on-premise or any hybrid landscapes. And one of the other biggest accelerators for Integration Suite is its extensive pre-built integration content, which has ready-to-use integration flows, standard connectors, best practice mappings, which can reduce the implementation time drastically. So you don't have to start everything from scratch. You have, say, if you have SuccessFactors, Salesforce within your overall landscape, it can just connect with its pre-built connectors, content that we have for those systems. And Integration Suite is a combination of multiple microservices, I would say, like API management, event-driven, or any B2B partner connectivity, which can have secure connections from S/4HANA systems and real-time data transformations from S/4HANA systems to any third-party systems. And of course, AI is everywhere. That's one of the other differentiator for the Integration Suite with its AI-supported capabilities like sort of assisted mapping suggestions or integration pattern recommendations, with which you can just reduce the manual effort and increase the accuracy of the integration development using Integration Suite. Integration Suite also has a monthly release of features. So we have new connectors and new adapters being released every month, along with additional AI tools for eventing and monitoring. So Integration Suite would act as a perfect pitch if you're considering a middleware part of the S/4HANA journey overall. Next slide, please, Jack. So clean core is one of the biggest message SAP passes across to their customers who are considering S/4HANA or already in the S/4HANA journey overall. Let's see how we can still achieve clean core while still enabling innovations. If you look at the slide, S/4HANA would be at the center as a digital core, of course, where the whole mission critical business process run. And around it, we have two different extensibility options like in-app and side-by-side extensibility. Integration would act as a bridge between S/4HANA and any third-party systems that you're trying to connect with which you can expose standard APIs from S/4HANA, publish business events, or even orchestrate process outside of the core, which would decouple the S/4HANA from third-party systems. So you're not trying to connect everything and anything from S/4HANA, rather you have a middleware to do that work for you. Instead of customizing S/4HANA, we can just build new capabilities on top of, say, SAP BTP via APIs and events that would provide the business more agility and faster innovation cycle. And of course, like zero modification to the digital core, which means you don't have to worry so much when you're planning upgrades, because SAP, of course, releases, if you're on public cloud, SAP do release twice a year upgrades, major upgrades. And if you're on private edition or on-premise, you have a yearly upgrade. So you don't have to worry so much while you keep your clone in core clean. You don't have to worry so much about the upgrades. So integration here acts as a shock absorber between your S/4HANA system and rest of the landscape. Next slide, please. Yeah. We've just categorized a few business risks that we have identified and heard from our customers who had been through on the S/4HANA journey. In many S/4HANA programs, and of course, the focus would be heavily on ERP functionalities, but treating integrations as something that you can sort out later is a big red flag for the overall program. Without a clear integration strategy in place, teams can make decisions that can lead to having point-to-point integrations or duplicated logic, which do not scale up eventually at some point in time later. And using legacy integration patterns like IDOCs, file transfers, or any tightly coupled interfaces would still work technically, of course, but then it do not align well with S/4HANA's capabilities of having event-driven or API-first approach. And one of the other biggest factors that we have seen in and out with every single customer is having a proper segregation of duties, handling like having a poor data ownership. When it's unclear who owns the data or who owns the end-to-end business process, failures can just bounce between the teams, having a slow resolution time, which would eventually have a huge impact to the business. Even though we do have inbuilt monitoring capabilities within the integration suite in itself, if you do not have, the integration suite monitoring capabilities can only tell you what messages have failed when, but it do not give you a clear picture of what has actually failed. So it's always better to have, say, custom headers in place, which can tell you whether the failed messages is for a sales order or a delivery, so that the decision making can happen properly. You can have decisions taken properly at business. And lack of monitoring overall would have a serious impact to the process, and which would eventually lead to an unsatisfied end user or a business process. Next slide, please, Jack. Yeah, so a lot of customers who are planning on S/4HANA migration, so mainly who planning on brownfield migration. Typically, customers do think of, okay, let's take like for like from our legacy system, EC system over to S/4HANA, and then work on standardizing the S/4HANA later. But then not considering that we should also have a middleware in between to help the overall migration is a biggest problem. You should not, from our experiences, you should not think S/4HANA as an integration hub. Rather, it should just act as a digital core. I mean, of course, S/4HANA is designed to execute core transactions like, say, finance or logistics. It can even keep the data consistency and integrity. S/4HANA comes up with a lot of standard events and APIs that can complement, but it's not designed to orchestrate the cross-system processes or handle protocol transformations within S/4HANA. If you're having extensions on top of your S/4HANA without integration in place, for every single upgrade, you have to go through a serious regression testing where there would be hundreds of interfaces, and even a small change that you make to one of those interfaces could have a biggest risk for the overall program. Let's say you have a custom code in place within your S/4HANA system today that can connect to a third-party logistics system, for example. You would, of course, have a hard-coded endpoint, credentials being maintained on S4. So even onboarding a new customer in place, a new partner in place would be a biggest problem for the IT team. And of course, S4 comes up with lot of standard APIs and events. It's not advisable to use them directly from S4, and having a middleware in place, using those APIs and events to complement the core system would be very secure data transformations for the overall business. With that, I would hand over to Yash, who will be taking you through how and when having an integration would help the overall S/4HANA program. Thank you.
Thanks, Sab. So how do you actually enable this business-centric visibility effectively? So Sab mentioned the main important thing is to actually reduce your architectural risk. So decoupling S/4HANA from external systems via integration suite. That's the most important thing you should be doing. Eliminating those point-to-point integrations and instead using standard APIs or business events where possible, and trying to get rid of custom code is the best way to decouple all of your systems and make sure that your architectural risk when you do go forward with an S/4HANA transformation is reduced. Making sure proactive monitoring is in place rather than reactive firefighting. So we've seen with many customers at the moment, they have teams that sit there day and day, and their BAU is just fixing data or contacting a third-party team to say, can you resend this piece of data, please? This data is wrong. So having that end-to-end message tracking across systems will be a real benefit to your business, because straight away you can tell where has it gone wrong, what's gone wrong, rather than just seeing interface number 123 has gone wrong. You can apply that to a whole business process and see, okay, my sales order interface has gone wrong, which means that this sales order has not been created, for example. So having real-time alerting in place, not only for failures of data that's been passed, but for stuff like any API slowdowns or the rate of events increasing or decreasing in your system, will be a really good indicator that, hold on, something's wrong. Let me try and fix it before it becomes a bigger issue. As part of this, obviously, having monitoring in the sense that business critical KPIs being monitored should be a key consideration. So things like orders, invoices, say deliveries, stuff that will affect the end customer at the end of the day. Those are probably the most important things to look out for. Now, business-centric visibility, it should be centralized as well as cross-system, like I've mentioned. So you can use centralized monitoring within Integration Suite. So you'll get that interface level detail, but also you should try using some other systems, say, for example, Cloud ALM for cross-system monitoring, where, say, you can trace a transaction across the full process. So say, for example, order to cash. That way you can identify where the failures occur. Do they occur more in the core system versus the integration layer? And then that way you can target that specific failure more accurately. And this obviously provides more transparency for both the IT and the business stakeholders. Preventing and reducing upgrade during changes and things like that. Well, if you align to the clean core strategy and you keep your integration logic outside of S/4HANA, straight away your risk when it comes to upgrades to S/4HANA is reduced, because you don't have custom ABAP code. And if you've used prepackaged integration content, straight away, it's stuff that's tried and tested by other customers, other consumers. So it's less likely to fail in your own system, given you obviously implement it correctly. So with that, let's take a look at how do you manage your integrations. So we have three different journeys that you start with in your actual S/4HANA transformation. So you have obviously the before phase, where this is your planning, you're planning what to do, how to do it. Then you have your during phase, which is the main part of your work, which is the execution. And then you have the after. So this is after go live. What does your path towards BAU look like? Now, this is the one that's most probably people consider to be the least important, but it's actually the most important. So before your transformation, what should you consider? Well, involving stakeholders and business users from early on is key, because they're the ones who are going to be dealing with the day-to-day problems. Training them from early is important, as with any new system, because they may know what Integration Suite looks like, but they may not know the advanced features that are within Integration Suite, or some of the extensibility capabilities that are within Integration Suite. Defining a clear BTP architecture and monitoring operational requirements upfront is very important, because without a clear BTP integration architecture in place, teams will create point-to-point iFlows. They'll create, use inconsistent security methods. Maybe some will use basic auth, some will decide to use OAuth, or maybe teams, if they're not speaking to each other, they could just create duplicate integrations that do the same thing in a different way. So these kind of decisions, mainly pattern decisions made late, are very expensive to undo. So using something like, say, SAP's Integration Solution Advisory Methodology, or ISA-M, it exists specifically to guide early design, and obviously Bluestonex can help you here if needs be. So as part of this methodology, I would say the two things out of the four things that they suggest that are the most important are exploring SAP pre-built content before committing to development. So maybe there's something already there that you can tweak to your specific use case, rather than reinventing the wheel and trying to find out workarounds to do what needs to be done between your systems. Then the other thing is modernization, not migration. So carefully looking at your legacy integrations. If you're on PO, for example, what can you reuse, what can you replace, and what can you retire entirely? So SAP explicitly recommends integration rationalization during S4 programs. And what we find with some customers is they decide, let's just take what we have in PO at the moment and shift it as is to Integration Suite, rather than considering, oh, maybe these 5, 6 different interfaces, we can combine them into one event or one specific interface going forward. These are the kind of considerations that you should have before starting your S4HANA transformation. So what about during your S4HANA transformation? Well, we suggest having your BTP sub account and structure defined early on is key, because on BTP, the landscape and the transport decisions that you make will affect every integration going forward. If you get this wrong, everything downstream will become harder as you start ingesting more BTP services going forward. So doing that proper admin work on BTP early will be a necessary headache, but it will save you a migraine later on. We suggest to avoid long integration freeze periods, because they not only prevent monitoring refinement, they stop people from having any security improvements. It stops your business from any pattern optimizations that you can do that you're seeing. So say, for example, an interface is currently point-to-point, and you now want to try and go towards event-based. If you have a long change freeze, it's likely that maybe that just gets forgotten about and no one ever comes back to it. You should periodically review for modernization. So this is a key that I've been trying to explain, is maybe SAP has released some new adapters or connectors in the last month. Integration Suite has monthly updates. So even though you're now in your process of the transformation, would these fit better than what use case you defined earlier? Is there a possibility of, say, replacing a workaround solution that you might have with a standard one? So you should always have a look at, say, the Business Accelerator Hub, where is there any new features that you can adapt to your business straight away and deliver that value for you? The other thing we see is unit testing of iFlows is not really real business, process testing. So you should have end-to-end testing. I mean, this is probably a a given. People probably know this, but failures most likely that we see, they happen because of connectivity or authentication or sometimes sequencing issues. Very rarely do we see that once a clear integration has been defined, it's a mapping issue. It's most likely, usually 9 times out of 10, a data issue. And here is where things like AI assisted mapping and recommendations from the integration advisor as part of integration suites will assist you further. It won't obviously replace integration design, but it can be a useful companion for you and your business. And now we get to the last stage. So you have now successfully implemented Integration Suite and S/4HANA. Next slide, please, Jack. Well, monitoring is business critical. Behind every technical failure, there's a business impact. So the linking those two together, getting that link between those two will help people understand in the business the context of the failure, not just that, like I said, iFlow 123 failed for X reason. They should understand that because of this failure, we're going to have delayed deliveries and the customer's going to be unhappy. Monitoring data, it also reveals stuff like frequent retries or slow interfaces or things like high volume peaks, or whether an API is being rate limited often. Does that mean we need to try and change some of the API policies behind it? Then this data can then be used to prioritize development on those specific processes and not just sit in logs and reports that people just look at. You should be able to proactively take that data and use it further to determine what should be prioritized for you and your business. We also see that many customers, they underutilize services on BTP. So they have some services active, but they don't use them. They just use, say, Integration Suite. But then you've got stuff like Cloud Transport Management. You've got things like Cloud ALM, which I mentioned earlier. So using these in conjunction will be beneficial for any business going forward. But then there is also the converse of that. So make sure you always align to a BTP roadmap. Don't just get carried away and activate any BTP service just for the sake of it, just so you can try it out. Make sure you have a clear, defined roadmap. So with that, now, when should you consider your integrations? Well, if you're on legacy middleware such as process orchestration, SAP PO, the deadline for that is 2027, and that's for mainstream support. So obviously, SAP is encouraging you towards Integration Suite. S/4HANA transformations, they take time, so they can span multiple years. Most of them probably 2, 3, even 4 years. So integration decisions that are made early will define the flexibility, the cost, and the risk throughout the entire program. API and event defined strategy, having it defined early is important, because if API management and, say, event enablement and event mesh are introduced late, you risk creating, again, tightly coupled point-to-point integrations. So having this clearly defined and analyzing where your integrations can be modernized is, again, key. And the one point I'd like to raise is that monitoring and governance, it can't be retrofitted. So having that visibility and governance, it needs to be built into the architecture from early, because obviously retrofitting is costly and disruptive, and you need to consider the risk to existing interfaces. It increases your testing load and requires more training for teams if you try and fit it in where you've got so many interfaces already up and running. So I have an example of a client now that I'd just like to briefly explain. They are on their S/4HANA transformation journey. It's a major transformation project for them, spanning multiple years. The planned start date is still a few years away, but their integration strategy has already been defined. So we have conducted multiple workshops with them to deep dive into the architectural design and the main requirements of their integration platform going forward. They already have a strict governance and monitoring policy in place, so it made it easy for us to identify their existing landscape, all of the integrations involved in detail. So that includes things like, obviously, message format, the throughputs, what senders, receivers, things like that. And having these already in place for their existing model is very useful going forward, because we now have a baseline of what has been done in the past and what can be improved on in the future. they are already ready for API and event-led integration. So from quite early on, they already had event mesh up and running. So their mindset from the start has been to modernize and not migrate. So at the moment, if they have many point-to-point integrations, straight away they're saying, let's try and get to event mesh. Let's try and get these turned into business events or data events where possible. And the last thing is they've been using BTP for years. So this is a key consideration for them is before even S4HANA, they have BTP. Their landscape was provisioned through our partner managed cloud model. They've had access to Integration Suite for years to learn the capabilities, the features, and monitoring. And it means that now their teams are well versed in Integration Suite, its features, as well as BTP and what services are on there. So when they do go forward to their S4HANA actual during phase and the after phase, they already have a great foundational level knowledge of everything to be able to succeed at that. So just something for you to think about for your business if you're in the same stage as this client. And with that, I'd like to hand you over back to Jack. Thank you.
Not seeing any questions pop through at the moment, but if you do have any that spring to mind later on after the webinar's ended, and you do want to get them answered, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll make sure to get those answered for you. I'll move back to the registration link for the next session if you didn't have a chance to scan it there. Yeah, that's a good place to leave it for today, I think. So thank you very much for joining, everybody, and we hope to see you for part 3.